But today I am joined by Brad Wetzler. Brad has more than 2 decades experience at the highest levels of publishing. He is an author, award-winning editor, journalist, and experienced book writing coach. He helps thought leaders, positive change makers, wellness professionals, psychotherapists, and everyday people like you write and publish their books that transform people's lives. When his clients publish their books, they get more leads, more income, and crucially, more opportunities to impact the world. So welcome, Brad. Really great to have you here today.
It's nice to be here, Emma. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem at all. And just to let our listeners know that we might have the appearance of Tommy now and again. So we'll make sure we say hi to him.
Tommy is my pal, my dog, and he shows up occasionally in my videos. So yes, he'll probably make an appearance.
So I'm asking all of my guests, the first question I'm asking is, what was your journey to writing and kind of what got you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I started out, I went to graduate school in journalism. And at that time, I really fell in love with magazine writing because of the longer form. I knew I wasn't really a newspaper writer. I like to tell stories. And I saw magazines as a way in for me to learn to do that. So I went to journalism graduate school at Northwestern in the United States here, and then landed a job as an editor at an adventure travel magazine, and had the opportunity there to, it was a literary adventure travel magazine. So I had the opportunity to work with some of America's finest writers, not just journalists, not just travelers. And so, novelists who we sent on trips abroad to tell great stories. And I had the opportunity to learn from them as I was editing them. And then eventually I wanted to be a writer myself. I knew that editing wasn't really my calling. And so I became a freelance writer and traveled the world myself, interesting places, interesting people, and brought back stories about them, and did that for many, many years. And then, kind of got into book writing, book publishing, book editing, and eventually into book coaching. And, really kind of developed my interest in even longer form than magazines, and telling stories, and really kind of got hooked into memoir. I'd edited a lot of people writing in first person, and I did a lot of first person writing myself when I did this travel writing. And I just love, the way that we can reveal ourselves through our writing and be creative with it. So there's something really interesting to me about kind of true stories about first person, but then adding this creative element of really telling a good story. There's a lot of power in that, a lot of lessons that we can learn from each other, I think, about our lives.
Yeah, I'm relatively new to memoir, but I do enjoy it. But I just want to, excuse me, sort of look back to your travel journalism. I'm very, very jealous of that. I love traveling myself. Where are some of the more exciting places that you've been?
Yeah, well, it was really varied. I mean, I found myself, following adventurers, explorers around the coast of Greenland. I found myself in the Amazon on, a boat traveling up the Amazon. I found myself, interviewing, one trip I went to Moscow and spent, 3 weeks researching inside the Russian space agency back in the day. And, and gosh, so many others. I mean, followed, walked the Jesus Trail across Israel. I explored Palestine as a tourist and tried to figure out, could you be a tourist in Palestine? Bali, Indonesia, India, false messiahs, gurus, politicians. I think I kind of had a chance to see a lot. And
I'm agreeing with anyway. That sounds lovely. Well, we're not here to talk about your travel writing. Right. Fascinating though, I bet that is. And we're here to talk about memoir. And one of the questions I see come up a lot is, and what is the difference between an autobiography or a biography and a memoir? And another question associated with that I get quite often is, don't you need to be famous to write a memoir or a biography?
Right, that's a great question. So first of all, the difference between autobiography and memoir. An autobiography generally is written by somebody famous, and is the telling. It's pretty usually a pretty systematic telling of that person's life. In a memoir, though, you do not need to be famous. People can write beautiful memoirs. And a memoir is a smaller slice of life. It's a story of a life told through a particular angle. For example, and it's usually about a particular topic. So, for example, a memoir could be about, looking into the subject of faith as seen through my role as a mother. It could be, an exploration of the idea of love as seen through the story of a, entrepreneur or an adventurer. So there's usually it's about a topic, and then it's kind of run through the filter of some aspect of your life. Because we all have very complicated lives, complicated personalities, and, memoir gets good when it's focused and when it kind of is run through these kind of the lens of a smaller way of seeing. And of course, part of that, I'm a big believer that structure and, adding limitations or kind of side rails to any kind of creative project actually frees you up to get even more creative. So I'm sure you can relate to that as a fiction writer, that really understanding your focus can really be a beautiful way to cultivate a lot of creativity. A lot of messages can come through. And the final point about that is, memoir, the themes of memoir really are the lessons we learn in life. And so they can be a wonderful gift to other readers. It's not, I think memoir can get criticized for being, solipsistic and kind of self-absorbed, but, done well, a memoir really shares struggles and we all go through some similar, we have different lives, different backgrounds. We all have our own unique struggles, but we all share some too. And so I think, these lessons learned through storytelling is a really powerful way to hand off wisdom to somebody else too. I mean, we all have wisdom to share, I believe. So
yeah, that's exactly how I've sort of come to memoir, come to see the value of memoirs when I've been going through certain stages in my life, reaching out to someone else who's been through something similar, and just knowing you're not alone, first of all, is so valuable.
Yes.
And then learning from someone else's experience and taking strength from their experiences as well. I love that. So one of the things I recently heard you talk about was with regards to memoirs, and I love this line, that we all have cargo. We all carry cargo. We have our histories, our backstories, and our own personal experiences. So my question would be, is all of that cargo worth writing about, or do we have to pick and choose?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is probably not. I mean, again, going back to this idea, we have many parts of us, and to make something useful to someone else who wants to read it and invest their time in your story, you do have to curate, what you tell. And of course, vulnerability is huge, and so you do want to share from deep places within you. But at the same time, when you figure out what your memoir is about and why you're telling it, I'm a believer that the story itself begins to tell you what it wants and what it doesn't want. It's sort of like a movie director, might shoot, hours and hours and hours of footage for a film, but as he or she gets clearer about what the movie's about, the movie starts to select for the director what it needs and what it doesn't need. And so, the things that become extraneous that don't really line up with your why, the why you're telling the story, become irrelevant. So, but that said, this is why people have several memoirs in them, because, what ends up on the cutting room floor in one memoir could be part of another memoir. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the why there, why you're writing a memoir. Is knowing why you're writing it, is that important to know?
It is important, and it doesn't always happen right away, though. And I think this is part of the, my coaching process is there's some mystery when you begin a memoir. You're not sure. I mean, you have all these stories that you believe belong in a memoir, and you don't know which ones belong, which ones don't at first. You start to write, and you need to get maybe 50 pages in before you start to really get clear about your why, but then it's an important step to take, to really look at, you know, your first 50 to 100 pages and just ask yourself, you know, what's this really about? And often that means sort of connecting with, you know, I'll use the word archetype, but it's kind of, you know, the world's big stories. I mean, how does my story, you know, it's unique in many ways, but it's also, is it the hero's journey? Is it a quest story? Is it a story about redemption? And you kind of need to, you know, plug our small stories into, you know, the almost like the great stories in the sky, you know, and how does it relate to, you know, the archetypal stories, the fairy tales, you know, and so, you know, we make it about more than ourselves in that way. And I think that's one thing I think maybe people get stuck in, is we get overwhelmed by, you know, the minutia of our lives and the stories we think we want to tell and need to tell. And again, there's a lot of listening in writing. And I believe that a lot of understanding the ways your story might be important to others. And it is a balance, though, because you can't spend all your time thinking about your reader's needs or hooking into the sky stories. You've got to, you know, honor your own voice, but there's a balance that's got to come in. That comes through the process, which is, I think, why working with a coach can be so useful, because those kinds of decisions and that kind of awareness we don't always have as writers. Even, you know, I'm a writer, and I need editors, and I need a coach occasionally to help me, you know, understand what I'm doing. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe kind of tying into that, I remember when I was listening to you talk previously, that there's sort of three aspects of storytelling or memoir telling. And one of those is the heart, which I think you mentioned just now. But there's the sort of physical reality of, you know, where the story is taking place and who's in it. And then there's the heart of the story, and then the head of the story. So I wonder if you could sort of talk into those three elements a bit more for me.
Yeah, I think, you know, even in our own lives, we understand who we are and our purpose when we connect our head, hearts, and our hands, you know, and so the you know, the thinking, the feeling, and the doing. And so, and I kind of bring that idea into writing, that we need to have all those things in alignment in a good story. And so, and I also kind of believe that the physical reality part is a very, very important part. You know, often I'll get a rough draft of a memoir, and it'll be all thinking. It'll be like, you know, these are what I think and feel, but it doesn't have any connection to the physical world. And so I actually like to ask my writers to almost begin in the physical world, start to tell me a story, because that involves, you know, hard physical things in the world. That's a very easy way for us to connect as human beings, because we share this physical reality together. And so if you establish even a few paragraphs of physical reality, and start to then talk from the heart too about how moving through this physical reality is making you feel, you know, then at the very end of that, or you know, in smaller doses, there's the need for the head, the thinking, and that's sort of, but that can be done very minimally, I think. You know, you know, when you tell a powerful story with physical reality and with sharing of emotion, you know, your interpretation, your mental interpretation of it is needed, but it's kind of needed in a smaller dose, because, you know, I think, yeah, we're often wrong about how we think about things. So, you know, it's like, and that's interesting we can sometimes, you know, a lot of people can overthink, and we really need to tell the heart and the physical story, and just leak the thinking in, I believe. So, yeah.
The kind of physical world of it, that feels like it might have come from your experiences for traveling, being in so many different places and having to take stock of these new surroundings before kind of the emotional heart of the story.
Yeah.
Does that kind of one feed into the other, or do you think that's just part of storytelling anyway?
No, I think you're right. I think I do have a bias probably that developed out of that, of my travel writing. But I do think that, and I think that as we evolve as writers, my hope is, you know, that the formulas that I often use in teaching, that the writer will grow through them and even figure out ways to break these rules. But I think when a new writer comes to me, you know, I want to make sure they're hitting these three areas. And it is part of developing your voice as a writer to mean, if you really are a thinker, you're going to want to include more thinking, but you want to make sure it stays grounded, right? And maybe if you're a big feeler, you need to add a little more thinking. But again, that physical reality just keeps us coming back to something we share in common. And it just, we're all on these journeys through physical space and time and through these internal places we have. And we can talk, we share a lot of this physical reality together. So we might as well use it as a way to keep the story going forward and to keep the physical, the action part, because action drives a good story. And, there's two kinds of action. There's physical action, and then there's the internal action. We do something, and then something happens inside us related to what we did. We start to climb a mountain, and then fear comes in. And, so we got to talk about the fear as we climb the mountain. And then we get to the top and we wonder why we're doing it. Then the thinking comes in. So it's all related, and it all can be done in varying degrees of percentages in a way, but it all needs to be there.
Yeah. It also, I suppose, the physical stuff as well, it can keep us, even though it might help with the action as well, but it is a way of kind of grounding us and giving us a place and knowing where, a feeling of security within the story, perhaps, as well. We know
there is, if I could add one more thing about that is, I think, truth lives in our body. I mean, the present tense, present is in our bodies. I mean, the mind can go to the future and to the past, but when you feel your body, you're always in the present. And as a writer, the more embodied the writing is, when you use words that are hard and twig, table, branch. I mean, these are words that you feel in your body and they land on you. Whereas, like Latin words like initiate or whatever, those are airy fairy words. And you kind of need to, you can use them, but they need to be grounded in this physical reality, I think.
Oh, interesting. Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Okay, so say I'm someone who wants to write a memoir, but I feel like my whole life the whole story is worth telling. How do I start that process of kind of deciding which slice of the pie I'm going to write about? How do I kind of start determining that?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, there needs to be an understanding that you're going to write a couple, 2 or 3 drafts at least of something. So, I do want to, it does depend a little bit on your personality. I like to get to know my clients. Some clients simply need to get started writing, and I can feel that in them. And if we spend too much time working on structure beforehand, it really boggles them up and confuses them. So I need to get those clients writing, and then the purpose and these structure will emerge, and we will have to have that conversation about structure. But then other clients, need to understand where they're going to go more, and I learned that pretty early on too. And so those clients, I do a lot of talking and deciding, okay, let's kind of get a structure that can feel safe and reliable that you can lean on. And we can certainly change the structure as we go, but certain clients do feel safer knowing where they're going. And so it is a little bit different for different kinds of writers and personalities, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that was going to be kind of one of my questions about, is it good to have a structure first, or do you just dive straight in? But you've answered that really, and that it's your personality will kind of be the determiner of, will determine how you.
Yeah, to maybe answer your question a little more, I would advise to simply start writing. Get 50 pages in before you even think too much, and just see what's starting to come out. And then maybe take a pause and look at what you have and start to ask, okay, am I going in the right direction? If so, then where am I seeing myself going from here? Often I'll give someone an assignment to simply write down, the 10 to 20, most transformative experiences of their lives, and just describing them, in a paragraph. And then after they write this paragraph, adding what was the lesson learned in that experience. And once you kind of have that document, then you start to have something that can be built into a structure. And with some clients, I'll even, have them, after they do that, do hey, what's the physical reality part of this story? What's the emotional reality of it, and what's the thinking part? And almost creating a heavily formatted list of these stories, so the physical, the emotional, and the intellectual, that then really becomes this document that the structure emerges from.
I like that. That's a really lovely way. And I think you could probably, I'm guessing you could use that both in memoir, but also be quite a nice exercise to do in fiction as well for the characters that you're writing about. So you've mentioned your coaching students, your coaching clients. Is it just one-to-one coaching that you do, or do you work with writers in other ways?
So I do one-on-one coaching, and I do a weekly class, a master class, and that class I've taught in more formal in-person structures before, where I have a syllabus. But so to answer your question, I do both. But this teaching I do in groups is a little more processy, a little more opening to people's questions, and maybe giving a short talk of the week. But my goal is to keep it going, throughout the year, rather than just having an 8-week course. And people can come and go, but they come and they bring their issues, and we talk through them together. And this is sort of the way I prefer to teach in groups right now.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like group coaching. It's you get the benefit of other people's experiences as well, and it always brings a richness to the group and to the experience as well.
Yeah, because what somebody else is struggling with is probably something you might be struggling with too. So it's something that we all can kind of work through together. And the process of working it through together, rather than having a teacher on high just telling you, teaching down at you, is not really a very powerful way to learn, I don't think, either. So.
Now you very kindly have a free gift for our listeners. Can you tell us just a little bit about it?
Yeah, I have an ebook that's it's called How to Tell a Great Story. And whether you're writing a story in a blog post or a book, or maybe even you're working in a different format, video or something, but it gives the essentials of telling a great story, and talks about things like internal and external action, how to begin a story, how to end a story.